One of our viewers mentioned that we ought to do a video on deregulation, a mechanism the Kooks of the Libertarian Party incorporate into their ideology. So we thought we'd do a quick video on what deregulation is and what we think of it in general. Deregulation is what happens when the Federal Trade Commission's laws that ensure advertisers are telling consumers the truth about the products they're marketing is taken away. So the advertiser has no rules then, and can tell you their drug cures cancer, even though the manufacturer knows perfectly well their drug is proven not to cure cancer, and actually might give you cancer. Deregulation is what happens when the Federal Aviation Administration's rules on air carriers are eliminated. So an airline no longer has to comply with pilot or any aircraft safety guidelines or protocol. That way, a pilot would no longer require FAA certification to fly commercial aircraft carrying hundreds of passengers. An airline could essentially hire anyone they like to fly a plane, even if their previous experience was only driving a taxi. It doesn't mean an airline would conduct themselves in this way, but they wouldn't have to abide by any regulations stipulating otherwise if they were completely deregulated. Deregulation is when no regulation applies to your employer, so they can decide to pay you what they think the job is worth, and that may be $2.50 an hour. An employer could also seat you next to a loose asbestos pile, since no health regulations would be in place with deregulation in its stead. Deregulation is also when regulations governing your personal information evaporate, and all the companies you do business with and give your personal information to would be free to share that personal information of yours with whomever they choose. Deregulation would also be when and if Las Vegas casinos stopped using their own regulated cards, chips, etc., and allow anyone to play with their own card deck. Deregulation is when that big nail polish factory near you can just dump their waste freely into the lake you swim in with your family, since no regulations would prohibit them from doing so. Not all regulations are good, obviously, but sensible ones also promote fair business between huge conglomerates and small businesses that are the driving force of America, really, if you look at the numbers. Deregulation lets big companies outsource labor and build huge factories in other countries where no regulations exist, keeping their manufacturing costs incredibly low with the cheap foreign labor, putting a strain on U.S. employment, creating unemployment, and giving huge companies an unfair advantage over small businesses that can't afford to build foreign operations just to take advantage of incredibly cheap foreign labor. Deregulation is when the government eliminates laws requiring a background check on gun buyers, like libertarians want. That's what makes them kooks. So that any gun may be sold to anyone, even a newly released prisoner who was previously convicted and incarcerated in a federal penitentiary for murder. Deregulation is when that poisonous cat food from a foreign country is allowed to pass into our country free of an inspection, free of compliance to any regulations that might otherwise ensure its safety for cats to consume. Again, not all regulations are good, but to concoct a plan to eliminate all regulations, as libertarians have, thinking that huge companies that already exploit every opportunity they get will somehow self-regulate and remain honest with their consumers, is pure silliness. Imagine how life would be if there were no regulations on automobile manufacturers, so their vehicles could deliver 5 miles per gallon, or not have to test their airbags or any other safety devices for any customer assurance that they work consistently. They wouldn't have to reveal anything. If there were manufacturing faults or flaws, they wouldn't have to reveal it. You would determine on your own, without their conforming to any regulations whatsoever, if the product was safe. Imagine if there were no regulations on food companies, so they didn't have to tell you what's in the weird pink sliced meaty looking stuff in the shrink wrap packaging. Imagine no regulations on your baby's medication, so if it happened to be an unregulated and possibly lethal dose, your only recourse would be to hire an attorney and go through an incredibly lengthy process of suing, and perhaps losing to a giant company's bullpen of legal minds, rather than just simply having a powerful regulation in place. That is what we think about government regulations and the insensible act of trying to deregulate everything, like libertarian Kooks want for America, and Republicans want as well. Republicans are the idiots who deregulated the banking system that collapsed under George Bush. And for those Republicans who like to say that was a Democratic majority Congress, no, it actually wasn't. For 6 of his 8 unelected years, it was a Republican-controlled Congress. Kooks want to deregulate America. Normal people know that a regulation here and there, like a stop sign or a speed limit, is a sensible thing. That's the difference between wanting to deregulate everything and allowing some ability to regulate.